am Kim Hughes, and thank you so much for joining me again for the Sane Crypto Podcast, which is the first cryptocurrency podcast specifically for baby boomers investing for retirement. You know, most people believe that crypto assets are too risky for the average investor. I believe that the risk is in not investing, and that in fact, cryptocurrency may be the answer to near retirees' prayers. The trick is to structure our investment so that if the naysayers are right, we don't do irreparable harm to our nest egg. But if the believers are right, we make potentially life-changing money that could catapult us across the retirement finish line. To learn more about that, go to sanecrypto.com/retirement to sign up for my free online training, how a little bit of Bitcoin can make your retirement savings go a lot further. I was really excited to have the opportunity to sit down with Jeff Vandrew Jr. to talk about what are known as Checkbook IRAs, for buying cryptocurrency and other alternative assets directly in your IRA. Jeff is licensed as an attorney, a certified public accountant, and also a certified financial planner, or CFP. He has had articles on cryptocurrency, estate planning, and tax planning published in various outlets, including Bloomberg Tax, CoinDesk, and Bitcoin Magazine, and has taught continuing education courses to attorneys around the country. Jeff earned his BA with honors from Rutgers and his JD from Rutgers Law School. And in this conversation, we cover how Jeff got into the cryptocurrency niche, because his practice is very specific to cryptocurrency. What is a self-directed IRA? Why is checkbook control, which is also known as an IRA-LLC, or a checkbook IRA, preferable to an, quote, old-fashioned self-directed IRA, and some of the rules and challenges of investing in cryptocurrency in your IRA. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jeff Vandrew Jr. All right, Jeff, welcome to the Sane Crypto Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, on the tax side of your business, you specialize in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I'm curious, is that because of a personal interest that you have in cryptocurrency? I mean, how did you decide on that as a niche?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. So I was involved in the space personally long before it was ever a part of my practice. So I became very interested in Bitcoin around 2013. And at the time I got interested, it struck me that, hey, this could become a lot more valuable very quickly. So what I did just for my own account was kind of devise a legal structure where I could hold Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency in an IRA or 401k, because there was nobody out there at that time doing it. Other than there was, the Grayscale Trust, which you could invest in, but that had some pretty high fees, and then you're not in control of your own keys. Someone else is holding your Bitcoin for you. So I kind of put together a legal structure that allowed me to be able to do this just for myself, never thinking it was much of a business opportunity. And then when the price of Bitcoin started to take off, I wrote an article actually about it written in Bloomberg, CoinDesk, Bitcoin Magazine, a few other places about these topics, and it just generated a ton of interest. I got like a flood of inquiries, and there were a lot of other people out there that were becoming interested in the taxation of cryptocurrency in general, in using self-directed IRAs or 401ks to invest in cryptocurrency, and other related topics. So at that point, I was like, wow, there's a real opportunity here. And also at that time, no other attorneys or CPAs were taking these clients seriously. I mean, the story I always tell is I was teaching a continuing legal education course to some attorneys on a related tax and estate planning topic around that time. And I mentioned, hey, are any of you guys dealing with clients, assisting them with their Bitcoin? And I was actually audibly laughed at by the crowd. People turned it into a joke. So that was the attitude during that time period toward clients that were invested in this area. So I viewed it as an opportunity and kind of went all in on it.
All right. Well, That it gives me a perfect segue into my next question then. Let's talk about, before we get into the details of that legal structure that you've created, let's talk about what the different options are for investing in cryptocurrency in IRAs.
Sure. So first of all, you're going to need what's called a self-directed IRA to be able to do this. And just for a little bit of background, the way an IRA works legally is under the IRS's rules, there has to be a third-party custodian, and that custodian has to either be a bank or what's called a licensed non-bank custodian. So most people out there that just have your regular typical IRA with, let's say, a brokerage, let's just say you have it with Schwab or TD Ameritrade or whoever. Schwab or TD Ameritrade in that scenario, they're a licensed third-party custodian. So they're acting as your custodian for you, and they're doing it for free. And the reason they're willing to do it for free is because they benefit from all the commissions off of you trading in your account. When you want to invest in things where, no one's taking a commission directly, obviously these brokerage houses don't want to do that. They have no incentive to allow you to invest in those areas, cryptocurrency being one example. So in that case, you need to find what's called a self-directed IRA custodian. A self-directed IRA custodian is basically a different business model. They actually act as custodian. They're licensed by the IRS, but they don't do it for free because obviously they're not benefiting from trading commissions. They do, however, as we'll talk about in a minute, there is a low-cost way to do it. So traditionally with self-directed IRAs, what you had to do was you'd sign a contract with a self-directed IRA custodian, you'd roll some funds in there, and then every time you wanted to make a type of investment, you would have to run it by the custodian, get the custodian's signature and approval, and they would charge a fee every time that you wanted to do that. And that's how they sort of, made their money. That was their business model. In the beginning, none of those type of self-directed IRA custodians accepted Bitcoin at all, or any other type of cryptocurrency, because they just didn't understand it and they didn't know how to store it securely. What happened over time is there were a few companies out there that started allowing investments in cryptocurrency through one of two methods. One was they allowed investments in the Grayscale Trust, which is not even an investment in cryptocurrency directly. It's an investment in a fund that in turn holds cryptocurrency. That really wasn't a good solution for most people because obviously there's a lot of fees charged by Grayscale involved in that, and you're not in control of your own keys, which makes a lot of people very uncomfortable.
And there's a huge premium on that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, y'all, I'm going to just break in here for a little bit of color commentary. When Jeff says Grayscale Investment Trust, what he is referring to is the known as the ticker symbol GBTC. That seems to be the way it's more commonly referred to. And I did an entire podcast episode on this. It was episode number 17, and the title was, Do You Recommend GBTC as an Alternative to Bitcoin? If you'd like to find that episode, just go to sanecrypto.com/podcast. Scroll down about the middle of the page, you'll see the episode list, and you'll see episode number 17 on GBTC. Okay, back to the interview with Jeff.
And then the other way to do it, which really wasn't a particularly better solution, was a couple custodians popped up and started allowing cryptocurrency as investments. But again, they maintained custody of the keys, and they charged a huge premium for the fact that they were storing your Bitcoin for you. So both of those were pretty unappealing to me. The newer generation of self-directed IRAs, which is what I'm involved in, sort of work a little bit differently. And the way they generally work is the IRA itself actually doesn't hold the Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency at all. What happens is we set up a custodial account with a self-directed IRA custodian, but that IRA only holds one asset. And that one asset is a limited liability company. And the IRA is the sole owner of that limited liability company. However, the account holder is the sole manager. And as manager, that gives the account holder the ability to fully control the funds. So what ends up happening in practice is you would do a rollover to the self-directed IRA custodian. The custodian immediately drops the funds down into the LLC. Once they're into the LLC, they go into an LLC checking account, basically. But then you have full control over them. So you then have the ability to also open up, say, an account on a cryptocurrency exchange under that LLC name and tax ID, transfer those funds over to that exchange, and you can start buying and selling cryptocurrency on your own account. And there's no fees involved with that. You don't have to get approval from the custodian. You're all on your own when you're doing that kind of thing, which makes it a lot more appealing. With that sort of setup, because the custodian does so little, the fees are generally very low. So, for instance, the custodian that we usually refer for, or that we usually use, I should say, for most of our clients, charges $275 a year, and that's it, regardless of how much cryptocurrency you have in there, or you can use it for other investments as well. It's not limited to cryptocurrency. So that is a much more appealing setup to most investors.
Okay, so, all right, so let me just run through that again and make sure that everybody understood that. So,
sure.
All right. So the first thing is you've got the IRA custodian, and that's probably going to be very similar to some of the other self-directed IRA custodians that are out there. So people like Pensco, someone like that. You're going to open the. Who do you use, by the way?
For my clients, we use SunWest.
Okay. So you open a self-directed IRA with them. You are going to roll over some of the funds probably from your brokerage account, your Fidelity, your Schwab account, whatever it is, the amount that you want to invest in these alternative assets into that self-directed IRA. You have created a LLC with the account. Tell me if I'm getting any of this incorrect. The IRA holder is the manager of the LLC, right?
Yep.
There's a process where the self-directed IRA is the owner of the LLC. So your IRA owns your LLC. And as the manager of that, you get to decide how those funds are spent. So when the IRA basically buys your LLC, that money goes into a checkbook, which is why it's called a Checkbook IRA often. Yep. And then you can open a brokerage account with Gemini or GDAX or whomever and use that to purchase alternative assets. Have I got it?
Yep, you've got it. You've got it correct. That's how the process works. And it sounds a little bit complicated, but for my clients, it's pretty simple because we fill out all the custodial paperwork for you. We get the account open. We also form the LLC for you. So we try to make it as painless as possible. We help with the KYC requirements as well at the exchanges, which can be a little trying sometimes to open an account in the name of an LLC, but we get it done.
Okay, so I want to talk about that too, actually, some of the gotchas. But just quickly, you mentioned that crypto is not the only thing that we can invest in these self-directed IRAs. So what else?
Sure. So a lot of clients use them for asset-backed lending. So that's almost like private mortgages. So in the simplest scenario, that could be a situation where a local guy in your neighborhood that flips houses, and you can use your LLC funds to loan him money for his next project, and then you get paid back principal and interest when he finally sells the house and pays off the mortgage. On a larger scale, what you can do is there are marketplaces nowadays where you can fund just little slivers of those type of loans. So examples of that are things like Peer Street. That's a site where you can do a lot of asset-backed lending for residential real estate. Another marketplace that's open up now is Yield Street, which is asset-backed lending, not just for real estate, but also marine vessels and a whole bunch of other types of asset-backed loans. Beyond that, there's other things you can invest in. You can invest in REITs, which are not publicly traded. That is a real estate investment trust. Some people actually use it to purchase rental real estate. You can do that as well and have your IRA own a piece of rental real estate. So there are a lot of different sort of investments in which you can get involved with this kind of thing. Almost anything you can imagine. There are 3 sets of rules you have to keep in mind, which I won't go too far into until we get to the gotchas section, but what are called the collectibles rules, the prohibited transactions rules, and the UBIT rules. But as long as you don't violate any of those, you can invest in almost anything you like.
So I assume all gold, precious metals.
So precious metals are a funny one because that's actually really interesting. Precious metals fall under the collectibles rules. So the collectibles rules give a list of things that are considered collectibles, and you can't invest in those. So examples would things that are definitely collectibles: wine, artwork, antiques, anything of that nature. All those things are. Comic books would also be collectibles, even though they're not specifically listed in the statute. Things like that you can't invest in. However, and gold and silver and precious metals are listed as collectibles. However, there's an exception to the collectibles rules if you meet certain requirements. And one of those requirements is that the trustee, which is the word the statute uses for the IRA custodian, has to hold physical possession of the metals. So gold is a special case. Unlike cryptocurrency, there's a bunch of special kind of extra rules that you have to follow in order to hold gold in there. Same thing with silver, platinum, and palladium.
Okay. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but isn't there an exception to the exception where like the IRA can take physical possession of American Eagle coins or something weird like that?
Yeah, right. So bullion has to be in the physical possession of the trustee if you're investing in actual bullion for precious metals. There are a list of government minted coins, the most common of which are American Eagles, whereby if you're buying American Eagles, again, or I think Canadian Maple Leafs are on there as well, there's a series of government minted coins that are on there, that there's at least a reading of the statute that would permit those to be held outside of the custodian's physical possession. Yeah. It is a little tricky. Not everyone agrees on that. The way the statute is written, and I don't want to go too far on this, is the statute says essentially that bullion has to be held in the physical possession of the trustee. It doesn't specifically state that the government minted coins have to be held in physical possession of the trustee. There are those out there that believe that the definition of bullion is broad enough that it would encompass government issued coin. So I don't get into which one of those interpretations is correct. It's ultimately up to the client which way they want to handle it. Obviously, the safest way to handle it is to have gold in the physical possession of the trustee. However, as long as the client's aware of the sort of ambiguity there, it's up to them how they want to roll with it.
Got it. All right. So let's talk about some of the gotchas of setting these things up.
Sure. So in terms of cryptocurrency, the main one is going to be making sure you don't run afoul of the UBIT rules. And in the cryptocurrency space, UBIT stands, by the way, for Unrelated Business Income Tax, which is not a very helpful name considering when that comes into play in terms of cryptocurrency is when you're trading on margin. So if you open an account with an exchange that allows margin trading, such as Kraken, for instance, that's fine. But if you actually do trade on margin, your profits become subject to UBIT tax, and that's a tax that you have to file and pay every year. So you definitely want to avoid trading on margin. The other thing that you have to avoid, it's an even bigger thing in terms of cryptocurrency, is the prohibited transactions rules prevent you from purchasing any assets from yourself or a family member. So if your daughter has a bunch of Bitcoin, your IRA or your IRA-LLC cannot go out and buy Bitcoin directly from her. You can buy it, from a third party like an exchange, but you can't do any self-dealing like that with family members or with yourself. The other thing that's not so much a gotcha that you have to worry about with cryptocurrency, but it's just a little bit of an obstacle that we help people with, are the KYC requirements, and that stands for Know Your Customer. that all the exchanges have. Basically, because all these exchanges accept fiat currency, the government puts certain regulations on them regarding vetting that they have to do with their customers. And most of your listeners, if they have cryptocurrency exchange accounts in their own name, went through this on a smaller scale when they opened up their own personal account, whether it be on GDAX, Gemini, ItBit, Kraken, whatever. With an LLC, it's a little bit different. The KYC process is usually a little bit more involved. They ask for more info and it takes longer. So what we've seen over time, I'll give Gemini as an example. Gemini used to be like my preferred recommendation for clients in terms of setting up an account for one of these IRA-LLCs. However, it was sort of like a switch flipped at the end of 2017. We used to be able to get them approved and the account open in like 2 weeks on Gemini. That would probably be the length of the process. It now with Gemini recently has been taking 6 months or more, which is crazy. It's just not a viable option at that point. So the one that we've been finding goes through the quickest is ItBit, which is also a US-based exchange. They're in New York, and we found that we usually can get the LLCs, the KYC stuff done and the LLC's account open roughly within about a week with them. So we've had pretty good success there. Obviously, it is ultimately up to the client what exchange you want to use, GDAX, Gemini, Kraken, however you want to handle it. But it is a little bit more of an involved process than when you set up a personal account. Like I said, they just ask for more documentation, more information, things of that nature to get started. Mm-hmm. And the last thing, I just want to mention, if you're using these self-directed IRA LLCs for investments outside of cryptocurrency, you do need to be very careful about the prohibited transactions rules that I mentioned previously. They're very long and in-depth, but basically you can't use the funds to self-deal with any business that you personally own. So you can't lend your lawn care business money or your friend's lawn care business money or things like that. The short story with those is everything has to be an arm's length transaction. And for our clients, we kind of give them a couple page primer that goes over each of the prohibited transaction rules just so that they're familiar with it and that they don't accidentally make a mistake. And actually, sorry, I said that was the last one. There is one other thing I always mention that's relevant to cryptocurrency. If you're opening an exchange account on an exchange that's located outside the United States, you need to let your accountant know so that when your taxes get filed, he files a foreign bank account disclosure with the Treasury Department. Because it's probable, although the IRS hasn't issued formal guidance on the topic yet, that a foreign cryptocurrency account is subject to FBAR reporting. Most clients aren't going to have to worry about that because Kraken, GDAX, Gemini, ItBit, on a personal account, Coinbase or whatever, those are all US-based exchanges. But if you're using, say, Bitstamp, or if the big one now is Binance, right? Binance is Chinese or Hong Kong, one or the other. Then you need to, file what's called an FBAR every year, foreign bank account report.
Okay. So it seems like there are also a couple of, I guess I'd call them risks as well. But before I ask you that, let me go back to ItBit is Bitcoin only, right? ItBit is Bitcoin only. So when I have clients that are going to be trading in a variety of currencies, here's typically what we'll do. We'll submit an ItBit application, and at the same time, they can also submit a GDAX and or Kraken application. The ItBit is going to come back first. They're going to get approved for ItBit first. And that still opens the door for them because what they can do at that point is, even though they can only buy Bitcoin on ItBit, once they've got Bitcoin on ItBit, they can use Shapeshift.io to shift that Bitcoin into virtually any other cryptocurrency you can imagine. Shapeshift is not considered an exchange, therefore they don't have any KYC requirements. You don't even create an account to use Shapeshift. You just go on there, you tell them what type of cryptocurrency you're sending them and what type of cryptocurrency you want to be sent back. You give the 2 wallet addresses, and that's it. You send X number of Bitcoin, you receive Y number of Ether or whatever you're looking to do. So that's Shapeshift works pretty well. Again, no KYC at all, so that makes things very easy.
And then eventually, you might get let's say a Kraken or a GDAX account open, which also opens up more different types of cryptocurrencies that you can trade. The only downside to, by the way, I have no financial interest in ItBit. They've just been easier to work with than most of these companies. The only downside to ItBit that I've experienced personally is they do not operate in Tennessee or Texas. So if you live in Tennessee or Texas, they're not an option for you. You'll have to go with probably Kraken or GDAX.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so it's interesting because that brings me to, I think, a couple of risks as well. And I don't know if you've encountered this or not, but so one thing that happened to me recently, interestingly, is just absolutely out of the blue, Gemini banned my personal account. With absolutely no, and no matter how hard you try, they won't give you a reason, and you are permanently banned because some algorithm says that you're a risk, right? Which is crazy.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
And so one of the things that is really worrisome, especially if you live in a state like Arizona or Minnesota, or like some of these states that seem to be in the patchwork of where some exchanges will open accounts in that state and some won't, is if for some reason your account was banned, you've got a real liquidity risk in that you could potentially get in a situation where you own these crypto assets and you have no way to liquidate them.
Yeah, so a couple things, comments I would have on that. One, it's always a good idea to open multiple cryptocurrency accounts for that reason. So most of my clients, when they set up this structure, at a minimum, they usually send in applications to ItBit, GDAX, and Kraken. And oftentimes they'll also send an application into Gemini. They're not going to hear anything for 6 months, but it will eventually get open. So that way, you have a variety of accounts so that if you do have an issue on one of those accounts, you have other accounts that are open. The other thing that's going on nowadays is there are a variety, and they're in their infancy, of decentralized exchanges that are popping up. The advantage to those is being decentralized. Not only is there no KYC, there's no one could ban you even if they wanted to, because there's no account. It's just a decentralized marketplace. And there are a couple now that even do deal in fiat currency. The original decentralized exchanges basically were only crypto to crypto. So they basically were a decentralized version of Shapeshift. But there are a couple out there that are now, from my understanding, dealing in fiat currency.
Really?
The liquidity is not as good because of the fact that obviously, there's less people using it than are using, say, Coinbase. But hopefully over time, usage of those decentralized exchanges will increase.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hopefully, coming from the traditional public markets, the idea of a broker shutting down your account is insane. Like you're like, what? Unless you were engaging in money laundering or something like that. But to just, it's just not conceivable. It's just not something you would think about coming in from the public markets. But, hopefully as this market becomes a little bit more established and the rules are clear and the regulations are a little bit more clear, that becomes less of an issue. But, for now, it was a stunner for me, and definitely one that makes you think about the liquidity, especially with an IRA, because I think you're a little bit more limited, and potentially you're talking about some big dollars as well, because most of us have the majority of our assets in our IRAs as opposed to taxable accounts,
Yeah, that's definitely true. And the good news is, even if you're limiting yourself to U.S.-based options, you still do have several accounts you can open. Like I said, GDAX, Kraken, Gemini, ItBit, all four of those do have a procedure available for opening accounts in the name of an LLC.
Another question for you in terms of the risks. seems like it would be very easy for someone who wasn't thoughtful about this process to like open an account in their name rather than the LLC, or, but then connect the bank account, things like that. I mean, I would suspect there's some risk in doing it yourself if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's where we kind of come in to guide people through the process. That's exactly right. Because one thing that you really don't want to do is set up this self-directed IRA LLC structure with, and use an attorney that isn't familiar with cryptocurrency and just sends you on your way. And then you go and you just, do your trading through Coinbase, which is Coinbase is just personal accounts. So you open an account on Coinbase, you link it to your LLC's bank account, and you trade through there. And that's a problem because although we don't have a ruling on this, the transfer from the LLC to that Coinbase account, which is in your personal name and not in the LLC's name, is probably a withdrawal from your IRA. And all of those trades are now tied to your name and social security number. Mm-hmm. So when the IRS subpoenas Coinbase to get information from them, or Coinbase otherwise does reporting, some of these exchanges in the U.S. now are issuing 1099-Ks. There's going to be a mismatch. The IRS is going to get information that basically shows that you made a bunch of cryptocurrency sales and you didn't report them on your own personal income tax return. So, yeah, that's definitely something that you would want to avoid.
Yeah. And I don't know this to be true, but I don't think you would want to jeopardize, especially if you have a lot of money in an IRA, that you would want to jeopardize blowing that IRA up. And, I don't know if they can reach into the rest of your money and say, oh, because you've mishandled this part of your IRA, you lose the tax advantage status on the rest of it. I don't even know if that's possible, but
it is actually, because it's possible to botch it badly. Sorry, it's possible to botch it badly enough that it's considered a prohibited transaction, and then at that point, your entire IRA is considered disqualified. So yeah, that actually is possible.
Okay, so that'd be really bad.
Correct.
Yeah, especially if you had a lot of money in that. Okay, and then so then the other thing though that I'm trying to work out logistically too is it seems like when you make that first transfer of funds over to the custodian that is going to ultimately end up in the checkbook of the LLC, there's no way to get any more money in there after you've set up that LLC. Is there? Okay, so how does that work if the transfer mechanism is the purchase of shares or purchase of the LLC?
So it's an LLC, so there are no shares in this case. LLCs just have what's called a running capital account. So the investment of the IRA into the LLC is just an investment of capital. It can continue to make additional investments into the LLC. Those are just considered capital contributions, which for tax purposes are a nullity in this case. So, yeah, you can make contributions as frequently as you want. For instance, I have clients that on a regular basis roll money out of their regular IRA with the brokerage to the custodian, have the custodian drop it down into the LLC, and then make investments. And then on the flip side, sometimes they'll end up in a situation where they feel cryptocurrency is too big a part of their portfolio. So they'll have the LLC sell some cryptocurrency, flow it back upwards to the custodian, and then do a rollover from the self-directed IRA custodian back to the traditional brokerage custodian, where it can go back into stocks, bonds, mutual funds, things like that. So all of that ends up working out just fine.
Okay. So, and that's a fairly simple thing then, it sounds like. It's just instruction to the custodian or to you, or
exactly right. So what happens is, let's say you do one rollover to the self-directed IRA custodian and makes your LLC, you're all good to go. And then let's say you do another rollover to that self-directed IRA custodian. You just have to send the custodian most custodians call it a direction of investment form, telling them to invest the assets into the LLC. And then what they'll typically do is just mail you a check made out to the LLC, which you can then deposit in the LLC's checking account. Or a lot of them will also give you the option where they can, for a fee, they'll wire it instead of mailing you a check.
Okay. And all right, well, that's really super helpful. And let me just circle back to one more thing that you said at the beginning. I want to make sure that I've got this right. So what are the restrictions on who can do this and who can't do this?
Sure. So pretty much in terms of the self-directed IRA with the LLC setup, essentially anyone can do that. Well, I should say anyone who either has a current IRA or 401k that they have assets that they can roll funds out of can do it. So anybody with an IRA currently can always do a rollover into a self-directed IRA LLC. If you have a 401k from a prior employer, you can also always roll that into a self-directed IRA. If you have an IRA from your if you have a 401k at your current employer, that's a little trickier. They may or may not allow in-service rollovers while you're still working there. So that's something you'd have to ask your HR department about. But like I said, anybody with a 401k from a prior employer or any kind of IRA can definitely do it, no restriction. If you're self-employed and you own your own business, if you have employees and your business has a 401k, you can since you're in control, you can restructure your 401k so that it allows in-service rollovers and go from there. If you have your own business and none of your employees work over 1,000 hours a year other than you and your spouse, then you're in an even better situation than everyone else because you can do a self-directed 401k. That's actually even easier to set up than the self-directed IRA. No LLC is required. You just have full control over the retirement account in total. You don't have to run everything through the custodian. So that's actually the optimal setup. But again, that's only available if you own your own business and you do not have any non-spouse employees that work over 1,000 hours a year. That's really good for freelancers or, other people that work as independent contractors.
All right. I'm trying to think are there any questions that I should have asked that I didn't?
No, I think you were very thorough and certainly seemed like you were prepared.
Hey, I have one actually. I want to talk about wallets. So
Sure.
after the LLC has made this purchase at whoever, Itbit, Kraken, wherever, the best practice is to not leave that sitting on the exchange, but to put it into a hardware wallet. And is that the same in a self-directed IRA? Is that also recommended? And is that custody? Is that a problem?
Yeah, no, that's not a problem at all. That's absolutely what I would recommend that you do as well. In terms of a lot of times, any hardware wallet I'm familiar with allows you to create multiple wallets within a wallet. Within the actual piece of hardware itself, I should say. You don't want to commingle personal funds and IRA funds within the same wallet. So to prevent people from doing that on accident, I usually recommend that people buy an entirely separate, let's say you use a Trezor and you have one Trezor for your personal cryptocurrency holdings. They're cheap enough that you should really just buy a separate Trezor just for your IRA holdings. Because even if you created a separate wallet within your original Trezor for the IRA, it's too easy to make a mistake, and that's a really, really bad mistake. So, commingling funds. So it's best to just have your own separate hardware wallet just for IRA funds.
Got it. Okay. And the fact that those funds might be sitting in your desk drawer, that's not an issue.
Correct. So cryptocurrency is not a collectible. So under the rules, so there's no restrictions on who has physical custody of the asset.
Interesting. Although, like any cryptocurrency, if you are not careful about that, you could lose part of your IRA, right? So all of
absolutely, just like any other cryptocurrency investment. That's right. So obviously, if you're using a hardware wallet, not only do you need to keep the hardware wallet in a safe place, but more importantly, you have to be mindful of your seed.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. This has been super, super useful and helpful. Last question, other than where people can find you, is do you have a favorite book or podcast on this topic that you think my listeners could benefit from?
Sure. My favorite book on the topic is The Bitcoin Standard by Saif Amous, who's one of the few economists that's really writing, what I think is well-reasoned, is writing in a well-reasoned way on the topic of Bitcoin.
I enjoyed that book as well, and recently interviewed the author for the podcast. Haven't published it yet. Curious what about that book why you liked it so much.
Sure. So, I personally, and this is certainly not the case with all my clients, but personally, my interest in cryptocurrency does revolve around sound money. And I thought that this book did a really, really good job of explaining the concept of sound money, making the argument for why sound money in the long run is beneficial for an economy. And in fact, I think it did such a good job. If I'm not mistaken, only the last 3 chapters were actually about Bitcoin. The early parts of the book were all really about gold and how that functioned as the original form of sound money. And then towards the end of the book, he gets into Bitcoin, why Bitcoin is an improvement over gold in terms of sound money. I guess that's basically it. Yeah, the end of the book gets into the more specifics of Bitcoin and exactly how the functioning of Bitcoin makes it the best sound money that's ever been devised to date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it definitely gives a worldview of crypto, of Bitcoin specifically, as opposed to, I think a lot of people who are looking at it from the investment perspective or even the technology perspective may, hear people talk about it becoming the currency, the worldwide currency, and you just think to yourself, well, that's impossible. How could that ever happen? Or why would it happen? And to understand also how it may be a threat to different governments and central banks and, how they may react to that. I just think generally it's a much broader viewpoint than probably what most people in the space as investors have been exposed to. So I also recommend it. So I'm really glad you brought it up. Thanks for that.
No problem.
Last question is, where can people find out? Actually, let me phrase it differently. What if you could be a little bit more specific about the services that you provide and where people can find you on the web?
Sure. So 2 most common things that we do for people are setting up self-directed IRA LLCs and or self-directed 401ks, whether they be for cryptocurrency holding or anything else. If you need an opinion on a cryptocurrency tax issue, that's also something we can provide. And one of the things we didn't talk about on this podcast because we only had so much time, but is we also provide what are called CRUTs for cryptocurrency investors. And the short story on those is that's a useful structure for someone who has held cryptocurrency for well over a year. It's highly appreciated and it's outside of an IRA. A CRUT is a type of trust that we can use to defer your taxes on those highly appreciated holdings. And then also, of course, we can assist with general tax issues, whether related to cryptocurrency or not. People can find me. The best way is my website, which is vandrew.com. That's V as in Victor, A, N as in Nancy, D as in David, REW.com. And as a thank you to you and all your listeners on this podcast, if you go to vandrew.com/sane, I have a special landing page there for your listeners that offer them $200 off of the setup fee for a self-directed IRA-LLC.
Oh, that is awesome. Appreciate that, Jeff. And I really encourage everybody who is thinking about investing in cryptocurrency and wants to do it in their IRAs to go check out Jeff's website. All right. As always, I hope you found that helpful. If so, you could do me a great big favor in return, which is 1, to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode, and 2, leave us a 5-star rating and a review with comments and feedback so more people like you can find me. You can get the full show notes of this episode at sanecrypto.com/podcast, including all the links and contact information for Jeff and the various resources that he mentioned. If you'd like to learn more from me about investing in crypto assets for retirement, you should register for my free online training, which is called How a Little Bit of Bitcoin Can Make Your Retirement Savings Go a Lot Further. You can do that at sanecrypto.com/retirement. So again, the free online training is sanecrypto.com/retirement, and the show notes are at sanecrypto.com/podcast. And finally, if you have a question about today's topic or anything else really, just email me at askkim@sanecrypto.com. I read and answer every single email personally, as well as answer some of them here on the show. Everything I say on this show is for educational purposes only. Nothing should be considered investment advice. Nothing Jeff said should be considered tax or legal advice. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investments involve risks, so do not, under any circumstances, invest money you can't afford to lose. That's it for me. I'm Kim Hughes. I'll be back next week. Until then, may the crypto gods continue to smile on us all.